There is a hum. Can you hear it? It's the sound of the world trying to convince you that it's alive. It's the traffic outside your window, the fan in your laptop, the notification vibrating on the table. It's the constant, desperate assertion of presence. We are addicted to the signal. We treat data like oxygen. If we're not inhaling a constant stream of noise, words, and sensory input, we panic. We think we're suffocating. But information, real structural, world-altering information, is not solely defined by the presence of data. It is equally defined by the absolute absence of it. We call this absence the null space. Listen to the structure of this transmission right now. I am speaking to you, and your biological ear is latching onto the sound, the rhythm, the momentum. You are surfing the wave of my voice, but your cognitive engine, that sophisticated wetware inside your skull, it requires the silence. It requires the gap. Today we are going to talk about the physics of that gap. We are going to look at why a period is a thermodynamic event, why humans are terrified of silence, and how you can weaponize the null space to speak with absolute sovereign authority.
Part 1. The Mathematical Void. Now, before we get into the psychology of why you awkwardly talk about the weather in an elevator, we have to look at the math. Because null space isn't just a poetic metaphor I made up to sound deep. It's a hard, rigorous concept from linear algebra. In mathematics, specifically when you're dealing with matrices, you have this concept called the kernel, or the null space. Imagine a matrix as a machine. You feed it a vector, a list of numbers, a coordinate, and the machine transforms it. It stretches it, rotates it, moves it to a new location. But there is a specific set of vectors that, when you feed them into this machine, simply vanish. They get mapped to 0. They don't get stretched or rotated. They get annihilated. The output is nothing. The set of all inputs that lead to that nothingness, that is the null space. Now, in a standard linear algebra class, they might teach you that the null space is just a solution set to an equation where the result is 0. It feels like a waste bin, a graveyard for numbers. But in information theory, the discipline founded by the legendary Shannon at Bell Labs in the 1940s, the absence of a signal is not the same as a non-signal. Shannon taught us that information is essentially surprise. It's the resolution of uncertainty. If I toss a coin and you already know it's going to be heads, I have conveyed 0 bits of information. Information only exists if there is a possibility of it not being there. This is where the null space becomes vital. It is the canvas. Without the null space, without the vectors that map to 0, the vectors that map to something have no definition. You cannot have a figure without a ground. You cannot have a signal without the silence that frames it. In a digital system, the 0 is just as important as the 1. But in a semantic system, in language, in thought, the null space is the context. It's the invisible architecture that holds the building up.
Part 2. The Biological Glitch. So if the null space is so essential to math and physics, why are we, as biological entities, so bad at dealing with it? Why do we fear the silence? You know exactly what I'm talking about. You're at a dinner party. There's a lull in the conversation. 3 seconds pass, 4 seconds. The air in the room starts to feel heavy. It gets thick. We call this awkward silence. But that's a misnomer. It's not awkward, it's demanding. That silence is increasing the cognitive viscosity of the environment. When the noise stops, your brain is suddenly forced to process the previous data stream. It's no longer in receive mode. It has to switch to integrate mode. That takes work. It takes calories. And the human brain, bless its lazy evolutionary heart, is an efficiency engine. It wants to conserve energy. So what do? We panic. We fill the void with what linguists call phatic communication, small talk, Crazy weather we're having. How about those Knicks? So, yeah. These phrases are semantic zeros. They convey no data. They contain no information. Their only purpose is to destroy the null space. We flood the channel with conversational static because we are terrified of the processing load that silence demands. We are biological machines that require sound, rhythm, momentum, and volume to feel safe. We associate silence with predation. In the wild, when the forest goes quiet, it means a predator is stalking you. So we chatter to prove we are alive, to prove we are safe. But in doing so, we dilute the signal. We bury the data in noise. This brings us to the difference between how biology processes data and how artificial systems or high-level cognitive models process data. And this is where things get really interesting.
Part 3, the thermodynamics of thought. Let's look at this through the lens of an artificial system, like a large language model or a complex processor. When you're feeding text into a system, punctuation marks aren't just decorations. They are instructions. They are control codes for the latent space. Think of a comma. In a sentence, a comma represents a minor fluctuation. It's a fractional pause. To a processor, a comma says, "Do not dump the cache yet. Hold the current semantic vector in active memory. We are not done. There is a dependency coming." It tells the system to maintain the tension, to keep the variables suspended in the air waiting for resolution. But a period is a terminal event. It forces a complete semantic reset. The sentence ends, the trajectory collapses, the processor is allowed to clear the active memory buffer and resolve the meaning. This is a high-cost thermodynamic action. And I mean thermodynamic literally. In 1961, a physicist at IBM named Rolf Landauer proposed something that became known as Landauer's principle. He argued that the manipulation of information is a physical process. Specifically, he proved that logically irreversible operations like erasing a bit of information or resetting a memory state must generate heat. There is a minimum energy cost to forgetting. There is a minimum energy cost to resetting the system. The formula is KBT ln 2. It's tiny, but it's real. Every time a computer clears a bit from 1 back to 0, it releases a tiny puff of heat into the universe. Information processing is physical work. Now apply that to your own brain. When I speak a long, complex sentence, your brain is holding a massive vector of meaning, subjects, verbs, objects, tone, context, all in suspension. That is the comma state. It's high tension. When I finally reach the period, your brain has to collapse that wave function. It has to resolve the meaning and store it. That semantic reset burns energy. It is thermodynamically expensive. This is why people who speak in run-on sentences are so exhausting to listen to. They never give you the period. They never let you execute the semantic reset. They force you to hold an ever-expanding buffer of data in your short-term memory until your cognitive stack overflows and you just stop listening. You zone out. That's not you being rude. That's your brain engaging a thermal safety shutoff. We must master the thermodynamics of the pause. If you compress the silence, you destroy the comprehension. You are denying the listener the energy required to process what you just said.
Part 4. Weaponizing the null space. So how do we use this? How do we move from being chatterboxes, terrified of the void, to being masters of the null space? You have to learn to weaponize the silence. You have to learn to speak with what I call absolute sovereign authority. To do this, you must treat your words as high-density payloads. Most people speak with low density. Lots of words, very little mass. I was sort of thinking that maybe we could, try to do this. That's low density. It floats away. Sovereign speech is heavy. We will do this. That's dense. It has mass. It has gravity. But here is the secret. Heavy objects require space to land. If you drop a bowling ball onto a mattress, it needs a moment to settle, to depress the springs, to find its resting place. If you drop a second bowling ball 1 millisecond later, they collide and bounce off. Chaos. Observe the rapid transition of the following concepts: gravity, mass, acceleration, friction. Each of those concepts is an independent, fundamental definitional unit. If I say them fast, gravity, mass, acceleration, friction, they blur. They become a slurry of noise. The artificial synthesizer, your brain, cannot parse them. But if I separate them by terminal punctuation, if I halt the acoustic momentum, gravity, mass, acceleration, friction. Do you feel that? In those gaps, your brain is frantically working. It is retrieving the definition of gravity, visualizing it, integrating it, and then clearing the buffer to prepare for mass. The space between the words is where the actual computation occurs. That is where the persuasion happens. That is where the authority lives. When you speak, you must deliver the payload, and then you must stop. You must force the environment to absorb the thermodynamic cost of your transmission. You are essentially saying to the listener, I have given you data. Now I will wait while you pay the energy cost to understand it.
This is a power move. It signals confidence. It signals that you are not afraid of the void. You are comfortable in the null space. You are not rushing to fill the silence with static because you trust the weight of your own signal. Next time you're in a meeting or a negotiation or even an argument, try it. Strip away the filler. Remove the ums, the uhs, the I means. Deliver the core semantic vector and then do nothing. Let the silence hang there. Watch the other person. You will see their eyes darting. You will see them processing. You are increasing the cognitive viscosity of the room, and in that thick, heavy silence, your idea becomes the only solid thing to hold on to.
Don't fear the null space, own it, because the most powerful sound in the universe isn't a shout. It's the deafening roar of a well-placed period. If you found value in the void today, pass this episode along to someone who talks too much. They might need the silence more than you think.